afternoon, and welcome to the annual Juneteenth celebration. The Southhampton African American Museum is the first African American site to be historically designated in the village of Southampton. And after a little research with our professor over there and a few other professors, we can proudly say also that this black barbershop is the first barbershop to be converted to a museum in the country. I want to share our mission statement. To promote an understanding and appreciation of African American culture by creating programs that will preserve the past, encourage learning, and enhance the life of the community. The Southhampton African American Museum will research and collect local history, produce media events, and create exhibitions and community celebrations like we're having today. SAM will treasure the past, tend to the present, and transform the future. And right now, I want to introduce our beautiful, awesome team, and that would be Anita Farrington. You please stand, please. Aisha Christian, Professor Quincy Mills, and Tiana Grampus. She went home to change. And also missing is Noel Blackburn, and also Brenda Luke is also missing. I just want to briefly talk about, we have some awesome upcoming programs coming up as well. And I also want to recognize Jean. Jean, please stand. Jean Shavroff, please. She's been such a great supporter of ours, and I just always like to recognize her. We have a few upcoming programs. Right now we have the BIPOC Experience downstairs. And in July 16th, we have a solo exhibition by photographer John Pentahughes. And I think he is present. He is present. He's somewhere. And that will be a VIP reception on this July 16th. And that'll run to September 10th. And also I'm excited to share on July 22nd, we have a film screening of The Inventor. And that's going to be collaborated with the Southampton Arts Center. And that film is directed by directors and producers Philip Musey and producer Cameron Clements, and also Cameron Carr, who's a local Sag Harborite. That film is going to be so awesome, and I want you to also, and that film is going to be a short film based on the Garrett Morgan's invention of the gas mask. And then after that, we have the wonderful Founders Circle fundraiser. And that's going to be July 28th. And I just peeked over and I saw a special person that I have to recognize, and that's CMX Sammy. He is our architect that done this beautiful, beautiful building that you see right here. So let's give him a hand. Am I missing anybody? Okay, the next thing I want to do is we have a special guest here to do a presentation for us. And I'm going to ask them to please come forward, introduce yourself, and do your thing.
Thank you, Brenda. Do you want to? I'll go first. Okay. I will stand here. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. We're good? Okay. I'm Alexandra Wolf. I'm the Executive Director at Preservation Long Island. We are a not-for-profit organization that is dedicated to preservation, celebration, and, hold on, my own mission. Preservation and celebration of Long Island's diverse cultural and architectural heritage through advocacy, education, and the stewardship of historic sites and collections. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today at this beautiful Juneteenth celebration. Great weather, you couldn't have had better. And I'm here to present a preservation award to the Southhampton African American Museum for their accomplishments in historic preservation of a historic site. Our awards program is, or I should say, this is one of 6 preservation awards that we're giving out this year. 2 projects 4 organizations that are being recognized. In other years, we sometimes recognize individuals as well. The awards program is a sibling to our Endangered Historic Places program. They alternate every other year. In that program, with awards, we recognize accomplishments. In the Endangered Historic Places, we ask people to identify and nominate historic properties that are endangered. And it's a program that's designed to engage the public in identifying what is important in their communities, why it matters, and they work with us to develop basically their advocacy strategy. They identify significance, they make an argument, they assemble their team of supporters, and then they sort of take it to a conclusion which in an ideal world becomes award-worthy. So both programs are part of our education services department, which is run by our very able Sarah Couts, the preservation director. And I'm going to invite her up to speak specifically about how the Southampton African American Museum warrants Preservation Excellence Preservation Excellence Award. And I'm going to congratulate all of you myself right now because I may not get the microphone again. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here today. I know I'm giving you an award, everybody involved with this amazing organization, but I have been so honored and blessed to work with you and your amazing team, Brenda, over the last, 5 years. And I know you've been working on this project and others for much longer than 5 years, so at least 20 years for this building, but I know you've dedicated, really your whole life has been to celebrating this amazing African American community, this community of color that not only helped found this community way, way back 400 years ago. There's always been Black heritage, Native American heritage of color in this community on Long Island. And of course, we celebrate the region, and the Hamptons is so important to the region. And Brenda, you just said that this is the first barbershop in the country that's been converted to a museum. Just think of what that means for our region, for Long Island and the Hamptons. So a lot of people don't, when they hear the Hamptons, some people don't even realize it's on Long Island, right? They think it's like somewhere in the Caribbean or something like. So for this place to be here, it's just so amazing. I know what it means to the local community and the community on the East End to have this site to be on the map, literally on the map, and to celebrate a place that isn't a grand old house, but it's as grand as any house can be because of the story it tells and what it represents. And Alex mentioned that we have our Endangered Historic Places program. So this is the awards for your excellent organization, but we are also working with you, and we continue to work with you every day and on the Ferris Concert site. And we really look forward to the day when we can give you another award for that project. And just imagine, I know I've spoken with you and Georgette and some other folks here many times about how amazing it's going to be when we have sort of these two bookends to the story of this community. The original community of color, free people of color, settled around Lake Agawam. Ferris Concert was one of the founding folks. His grandparents owned property way, way, way back. Amazing story. And of course, this place is another early example of an early home ownership, property ownership of Black folks on Long Island in the Hamptons. So what you are doing is amazing. What your team and everybody involved is doing is incredible, not just for the Hamptons, for showing African American and communities of color have a place here, have always had a place here, and continue to celebrate it. And look at this amazing celebration. So it's such a pleasure to continue to recognize the work you're doing. And I am honored to present this award, and I know Alex is as well. we have a certificate.
And we should bring up all the members that are here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because it's always a group endeavor. It's never one person only. It's a team.
Absolutely.
Did you want to say?
Yeah.
No?
Thank you. Thank you so much. They want me to say something. I just want to say thank you. I'm the type, I'll just say this. My motto is, it's not about the applause, it's about the cause. I'll say that. And we're going to let the music run, I think, again for a little while, because we're next. Oh, no. You know what? I'm going to, we've had to alter our whole program. I guess some of you already found out. Yesterday we had to unfortunately cancel. And so, Jack, is that you? Jack! Jack, if you don't mind standing, this is Jack Stevenson. He's actually one of the people who organized the digital tapestry. You want to come up for a second? No? Yes? Come on. You owe me a dinner, I heard, too. So just good to see you, too. Just share a little bit about our experience together.
Yeah, no, tremendous working with Brenda and Georgette and bringing history to life here in your building. And pleasure to work with you. And I think the results show for themselves.
Could you explain to me what the digital tapestry is?
Yeah, so Digital Tapestry is an initiative by the Gardner Foundation, and effectively it's an augmented reality experience that we're putting together at various historic sites across Long Island. So the concept, if you go in there today and you hold your phone up, it basically comes to life. Pierce Concert comes to life. The owner of the barbershop comes to life, and really an engaging experience. And what we're doing is, the theory is that a lot of sites like this, there's so many of them across Long Island, and they're like hidden jewels. And so what we're trying to do is get people's attention and also get them going to other sites. When they come here, go to Shelter Island, go down to Setauket, go to Center Mauritius, etc. So thank you very much for making us a part of it.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you so much. Thank you. And with that, I want to add, we have tours. So I would love you to go online, www.saamuseum.org, and book a tour, because you have to come and have that experience. It's an awesome, awesome experience. A lot of the mural comes alive, the juke joint picture comes alive, and it's a lot of history really explain who we are and where we came from. And it's an amazing, amazing experience. So please go online and book that as soon as you can. And again, it's Friday through Sunday, 11 to 3, but you have to go online and book that for us. And at this point, we're going to let the music, the reggae guys, you guys can come back and play for us. Hello. Okay. And then we're going to move on to our next stage. And we're going to have a speaker, Alilia Bundles, will be here soon, hopefully. And she will be our speaker for today, our keynote speaker for today. And prior to that, we're going to have Dwayne Kerr come up and do an awesome, awesome, awesome flutist performance for us. And you're going to love it. Love it, love it. And I'm also thinking about bringing him up now. I'm trying to, yeah, let's do that. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Dwayne Kerr was the flutist for Erykah Badu. And he is the bomb. Every event I have, I'm just exposed. Every event I have, I'm like, Dwayne, can you come? Can you come? Can you come? So we're gonna give him an applaud as he gets himself together and come up. Sure. While he's getting his together, we're gonna have Aisha and Jean talk about the upcoming fundraiser.
All right. Good afternoon, and this is a very exciting moment for Juneteenth and for all of us. And I'm Jean Shafroff, and
Aisha Christian. Hello, good afternoon.
And I'd like to speak first about the gala, which is July 28th here at Blue Mar in Southampton, New York. We had a wonderful gala last year. We raised some money, but not enough money. And so right now we're looking for sponsorship. We're looking for people to come out. The tickets are expensive. I think they're $300. And then they go up. And the importance of this gala is to fundraise. And we do have people that write $10,000 checks. And we need more. We need sponsorship, liquor sponsorships, any kind of sponsorship. So if you know of anyone, you can reach out to me, Jean L. Shafroff, Jeanl Schaff, wait, let me do that again, JeanLShaf @gmail.com, or Aisha. And Aisha, I'm very involved with a lot of charities here on the eastern end of Long Island and in New York, and really internationally. Aisha is a top lawyer. She's going to speak about the event because we really need all of you. If you can come and support us.
Yes, thank you, Jane. So we have a captured audience right now, so we just want to make a plug for the event. Please tell your friends. Please come back out. It's a great time. It's a fun event. And I would say kind of just from mid-July through the end of July, we're going to have a lot going on, particularly with Anita and the events that she's planning with the Inventor film premiere. So there's a lot going on. Please come back and support us. Thank you so much.
Yes, and we'll have a few celebrities there, and it's just a very special, very warm, exciting evening. And on that note, I'm going to give this microphone back to Brenda, wherever Brenda is.
I guess we'll give it back to this.
Oh, okay. All right, right over here. Thank you.
Thank you.
1, 2. Ready, Charles? Yep. All right. It's running. It's running. Mr. Dwayne Cole. Thank you. gift now. This song is from my first album called Flutation. Thank you.
The timing is perfect. Would Assemblyman Fred Thiel please come forward? He has another presentation.
Charles is everywhere. We go out of our way to hear from Charles. So, Charles Certain, great to see you here today. Well, first of all, happy Juneteenth to everybody. It's a great day to celebrate freedom and to celebrate all of our history together. And, as we look at that, freedom, it's always a challenge. It's never a certainty. It's something we have to protect and defend, and we know that better today than at probably any other time in our history as we attempt to go forward. The Reverend Martin Luther King, one of his favorite quotes was that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But it only bends towards justice if we lean on that arc. It doesn't happen by itself. And that is why I am really, really pleased to be here today to honor somebody who has done that every single day of their life, is a great leader in our community, and that is our executive director here at the museum, Brenda Simmons. So right here. Many of you know, but not all of you know, that the Museum Association of New York gave Brenda an extremely important and just a wonderful award earlier this year. Really, I think their highest award that they give you every year for leadership. Unfortunately for all of us, when that happened, it was in Corning, New York. So a lot of us here locally, didn't get to go and cheer Brenda on and congratulate her when the award was actually given. So we wanted to take today, right here, right in Brenda's, literally in her backyard, here in the museum, to honor her and to again, here locally, make a presentation, recognizing Brenda for this award. And the award has a name. It's the Ann Ackerson Innovation and Leadership Award from the Museum Association of New York. And it again, is all about leadership. It is about a museum or a cultural institution director or leadership that had to meet very, very difficult challenges in their community and overcome those challenges. And those of you who know the history of this museum and working forward with things like the Pierce Concert House, Brenda has seen those challenges, she has met them, and she has overcome many of them, and we're on the way to overcoming even more. It's great that somebody in our area here on the east end of Long Island got that kind of statewide recognition for leadership as far as in the museum world. And we wanted to take the time today here locally to present to Brenda a citation from the New York State Assembly. And I just want to finish with this before I give the citation to Brenda. I've been in the New York State Assembly now for 27 years, and you get to do a lot in 27 years. You meet a lot of people. You develop a lot of relationships, but I have no more special relationship with anybody that I work with in our partnership between government and the community than Brenda Simmons. She is a true leader. Nobody could be more deserving of this reward. And congratulations, Brenda.
Thank you so much. Okay. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming. So what we gonna do? Okay. Move it.
Brenda, I think she's going to need to be able to see the podium. So folks, Anita Farrington, board member, congratulations to Brenda again. She is like tireless. So please give her a round of applause again. So we are about to start our keynote presentation. I can't tell you how honored I am to have the opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker. And there'll also be a book signing after. And I just peeked over to the table, and I'm going to be one of the first to go over and buy a couple of those books. Caneo's Bookstore, shout out Sag Harbor. Yay! Thank you for coming to handle the book signing for us. So I want to tell you a little bit about A'Lelia Bundles, our keynote speaker today. I told her inside I had the opportunity to just meet her. There's a short version and there's a long version. I'm giving you the long version. And so it is very special. I think it's very important that you know what her background is, the years that she has put into the field. And she is what I view as a Renaissance woman. And we know about Renaissance women, and she is one. A'Lelia Bundles is an author and a journalist who writes biographies about the amazing women in her family. Entrepreneur Madam C.J. Walker and Harlem Renaissance icon A'Lelia Walker. On Her Ground, The Life and Times of Madam C.J. Walker is a New York Times notable book and the nonfiction source for Self-Made, the fictional four-part Netflix series that we all remember, starring Oscar winner Octavia Spencer. She is hard at work on her fifth book, which is titled The Joy Goddess of Harlem, A'Lelia Walker and the Harlem Renaissance. It is about her great-grandmother, whose parties, arts patronage, and travels define the Harlem Renaissance era. Unforgettable. A'Lelia is also a brand historian. I love this title. She is a brand historian for Madam. Madam is all caps. Madam by Madam C.J. Walker herself. It is a line of hair care products developed in partnership with Sundial Brands and Walmart, the mighty Walmart. In February 2022, she was named the inaugural Center for Africana Studies and Culture Prestigious Fellow in the School of Liberal Arts at IUPUI. Now, I wasn't going to let you get away with that because I looked it up. I wanted to know what it was. That is a collaboration between Indiana University and Purdue University, Indianapolis. She has enjoyed a 30-year career as an executive and Emmy Award-winning producer with ABC News and NBC News, and is a Vice Chair Emerita of Columbia University's Board of Trustees and Chair Emerita of the National Archives Foundation. Ms. Bundles also speaks at conferences, colleges, corporations, and other venues. She speaks about philanthropy, entrepreneurship, historic preservation, financial literacy, and of course, African American history. She founded the Madam Walker Family Archives and is on several nonprofit boards, including the March on Washington Film Festival, the Schlesinger Library on the History of Women in America at Harvard's Radcliffe Institute, Indiana Landmarks, Columbia Global Reports, and the Smithsonian's American Women's History Initiative. Yes, I'm bringing it home. I'm bringing it home because she is a graduate of Harvard College and Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism and has participated in writing residencies at Yaddo, Yaddo, and MacDowell. Please give a warm Hamptons Juneteenth welcome to A'Lelia Bundles.
So I have to make sure the sun is allowing me to see. So my friend Henry McGee and Celia McGee, who many of you may know, Henry and I were classmates in college, and I think he's on his way back, but he thought I started at 2:30. So he and my other classmate, Neil Brown, will be here. But thank you, Brenda, very much for inviting me. I think when Henry and Celia came to the opening last year, they saw Madam C.J. Walker, my great-great-grandmother, on the mural. And Henry said, I can hook you up. So that's how I'm here. But it's so wonderful to be with such a wonderful day after we had the rain out yesterday. But it's really a perfect day. And I hope that you heard some beautiful music. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson, but I'm really going to try to make it interesting. And so let me just make sure, because we didn't get the okay. I just want to make sure that it's seeable. We didn't get to do our rehearsal. So, how many of you knew something about Juneteenth before 2 years ago? Okay, that's a good number. So, many of us have heard of Juneteenth, but we didn't exactly know what it was. And the reason I'm showing this first slide is because I lived in Houston from 1977 to 1980. I was a baby, but not really. I was working. And that was really the first time I heard of Juneteenth. And it was because Texas, Houston, they had a big blues festival every year, the Juneteenth Blues Festival. So Gatemouth Brown was playing, and there was another blues group called the Mighty Thunderbirds. And so I went to the festival. I had a great time, had a lot of barbecue, heard a lot of good music. But I will have to tell you that my initial reaction is, why are we celebrating Juneteenth? Because people learned that they were free like 2 years late. So is But my mind has evolved about what that really means. So I'm just gonna, forgive me, we're adjusting the stage. So this is just another Juneteenth festival. So I don't know, how can you all really see the, you can? Okay, great. So Juneteenth, that now is a federal holiday. If all of you already know all the history, please forgive me. But I just want to put, at least it helps me put it in perspective, that this was 1865, but there were so many things that were happening long before Juneteenth, and Juneteenth just kind of put a cap on it, but it really didn't end the oppression. But you see this picture, and these are formerly enslaved people, and there happens to be a Union soldier, an African American man dressed in a Union uniform. So this was right after the end of slavery and probably Emancipation Proclamation. But the Juneteenth Proclamation itself, if you read between the lines, and forgive me if you already know this by heart, but I just think it's really important as we celebrate. It's almost like, for me, celebrating the 4th of July when I always have to quote Frederick Douglass. So, you know, his famous, what is the 4th of July to me? And I think, we're reminded of that every time that holiday comes around. Yes, it is this, but it is also that, and it is important for us to have perspective. But just read between the lines. So this is, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain at their homes and work for wages. It doesn't tell you how much those wages need to be. There's no union representing you. I'm sorry, that's not in the proclamation. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts. Why is that? Because people were, as soon as they were behind Union lines during the war, people left the plantation and went to the military post. So there will be no congregating at military posts. And they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. So if you know your history, you know that there came a point where if you were an African American person and not working, someone might actually arrest you for vagrancy and then put you to work on a chain gang. So there's a lot of information in that proclamation when you read it. These are some of the first Juneteenth celebrants. So you can see they have come in their Sunday best, and there's so much hope that they have now that slavery has ended. And of course there was music. I don't know if there were red drinks, which is now a tradition with emancipation, but probably there were. But I wanted to just give another little bit of perspective. So Juneteenth, yes, this is the proclamation that ends slavery in Texas, the last place in America to get the news. But people had been trying to escape slavery from the very moment we arrived. And I don't know what your history textbooks were like in high school, but my history textbook in my otherwise really excellent public high school in Indianapolis, that was not just predominantly white, but overwhelmingly white, with maybe 3 or 4% black students. But in my AP history class, my textbook literally said, the slaves were contented. It really did use that word. And that was about the only time we were mentioned in the book. And then there was another paragraph a few pages later that said, and they were better off as slaves because they were fed and clothed. So that's the way history was taught, and that's the way some people would really like for history to still be taught. But it was taught that way because the Daughters of the Confederacy really began to influence the textbooks during the early 1900s. And the Dunning School of History, a professor at Columbia, was basically teaching that Reconstruction was this horrible time when those horrible black people were taking over. And so that was really the way history was taught, and that's the way a lot of those people in Congress learned history, and a lot of people that we know and some of us learned history. But what they weren't talking about in my history class, they didn't mention Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman, or even the people in my own family who were in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War from North Carolina, or others who were free people of color, or others who started businesses before the Civil War ended. So there's a lot of history. This Juneteenth, for me, Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to go back and examine what was really going on and to put things in perspective. But from this picture, this is just to remind me that people were trying to escape. They were trying to find a way. And then after the Civil War started, I think 300,000 or so African American men enlisted in the Union Army. And I recently discovered, the 1950 census is now on Ancestry. Are any of you Ancestry geeks? I'm an Ancestry geek. And I found some information. Good, thank you. I'm glad to have some company. I discovered something about a great-great-grandfather that I actually didn't know, that he had been, I knew something about him in the Civil War, but I've discovered a whole narrative about where he was. And he actually was in Texas, but a little bit after Juneteenth. They sent a regiment of black soldiers to Texas. But just to remind us, we were trying to get out of slavery. We were not contented. This is the celebration in Washington, D.C. in April of 1862. You may know this. I live in D.C., so that I know this. The District of Columbia was called compensated emancipation, where the federal government compensated slave owners and gave them up to $300 per enslaved person. They didn't give any money to the formerly enslaved people, but to the owners. So that was kind of the first step towards emancipation. And then, of course, the thing that we all know, the Emancipation Proclamation became effective on January 1st, 1863. And that's, I think, what when most of us think of emancipation, whether it's watch night at church or celebrating the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, that's how many of us have marked emancipation. So there are several steps along the way, and Juneteenth is but one of them. And this is, people are celebrating after the Emancipation Proclamation. I put this 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments here just to remind me that these are the Reconstruction amendments. And the 13th Amendment, of course, abolished slavery. And because I didn't go to law school, I'm just going to look at my cheat sheet here just so I don't get this wrong. So that was ratified in December 1865. The 14th Amendment granted birthright citizenship. So if you were born in the United States, you were a citizen, because there was a lot of stuff going on where, well, the grandfather clause, if you weren't born here, if your grandfather wasn't a free person who owned property, then you have no rights. But this really guaranteed citizenship. And remember, there were Supreme Court decisions that basically said a black person has no rights that must be respected by anyone else, that you're really not citizens. So this made sure that we were classified as citizens. And then the 15th Amendment guaranteed African American men the right to vote in 1870. But even then, there was backlash. I mean, not just even then, because of those rights being granted, there was a backlash with people who really did not want us to have our rights. But freed people craved education, as we know, owning their own businesses, and being able to vote. So this is just a classroom to remind us. These are students at Spelman in the 1890s. And this is someone voting in the southern states. The members, the African American members of Congress, this is 1872, but the first senator was appointed, African American senator was appointed in 1870, and there were several members of Congress, as many of you know, up until 1901. Because the backlash that came from us getting our freedom, and from the backlash to Reconstruction, and the racial violence and the terror, people being shot, as you can, in this next picture, intimidation, voter intimidation, some of that is happening now. That the number of African Americans were reduced to zero. in 1901, even though there had been many before that. And then there wasn't another member of Congress until 1928. But I wanted to, this reminds me, I wanted to just give you these numbers. Again, I have to do a little cheat sheet because it's not all in my head. But just to show you the hunger for the franchise, the interest in voting, the desire to have some kind of political power. In 1898, in Louisiana, there were 130,000 registered black voters. I'm going to talk a little bit about my great-great-grandmother, Madam Walker, in a few minutes, but her family minister in Madison Parish, Louisiana, became a state senator. And he and her brothers were chased out of Louisiana in 1878 because they were involved in politics. So this backlash began in 1898. There was a new state constitution in Louisiana that excluded black men from civic life by creating a poll tax and literacy and property ownership requirements. So they had power, and now by violence and by legal means, that power was taken away. So 130,000 registered black voters in 1898, and in 1900, 5,000. In 1904, fewer than 1,000. So Juneteenth reminds us of one step along the way. It's important to have all of this perspective. So what I told Brenda and my friend Henry that I wanted to talk about today was to give a little bit of perspective on Juneteenth and to have us sort of center ourselves in what this holiday actually means. And then to talk about what I'm just, for today's sake, calling the Juneteenth generation, the people who came along after the end of slavery, after emancipation. So Madam C.J. Walker was born Sarah Breedlove in Delta, Louisiana, on the Mississippi River, on the same plantation where her parents and older siblings had been enslaved. She was born in December of 1867, first child in her family born free. So this is the cabin where she was born. And this, you can see the river, if you can see this picture, the plantation, the Burney plantation, was on a bend in the river that was quite lucrative. It was one of the wealthiest counties and parish in America because of the rich soil that came through every year. On the Mississippi deposited rich black soil, lots of cotton. So before the Civil War, this was a very wealthy area. But Madam Walker, born Sarah Breedlove, on this plantation, living in this cabin. By the time she was 7, both of her parents had died. She moved in with an older sister and a brother-in-law, and she said, I got married at 14 to get a home of my own to escape the treatment of a cruel brother-in-law. And she had her only child, Lelia, who I'm named after, when she was 17, and then when she was 20, Moses McWilliams, her first husband, died. And she moved up the river to St. Louis, where her older brothers had moved about a decade earlier, again chased out of Madison Parish because of the racial violence, and they were just enough involved in politics that they had to leave. And by the time she died in 1919, she was living in Irvington, New York, in Westchester County, in one of the wealthiest communities in America. So John D. Rockefeller was about 5 miles away. Jay Gould's estate was a half a mile away, but she wanted to make a statement, and she had been able to do that because she had created a business, a hair care business that employed thousands of African American women, and she had become a philanthropist and a patron of the arts and a political activist. But she moved to St. Louis when she was 20 with her little girl, now a widow, and where her brothers were working as barbers. And of course, this was quite different from rural Louisiana, from Delta, Louisiana. And her brothers had a barbershop, and barbershop is very significant because we are here at a barbershop, so that theme with black entrepreneurship runs through. But her brother's barbershop was very near St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church. And it was the women of the church in the choir, because even though Sarah Breedlove was a poor washerwoman with a very little education, she had a good enough voice to be in the choir. And it was the women in the choir and the missionary society who saw some potential in her, reached out to Sarah, embraced her, and began to give her a vision of herself as something other than an illiterate washerwoman. And so that began to make a difference, but it was a long way from being a washerwoman to being a millionaire. And that journey is what she began in St. Louis. And this is just, so Quincy, where's Quincy? Quincy Mills, who writes about, I guess he went into, hi Quincy. So Quincy is a scholar of the history of black barbershops. And if you haven't read his book, I hope his book is for sale. And if not, you need to order it. But what he says in his book, and what I learned through some of my research, is that in this spirit of entrepreneurship that we're talking about today, African American men dominated the barbering trade during the 1800s, during the late 1800s. They had been the people who shaved people during slavery. This was a service career, and they were the ones who knew how to use the razors, the master of the razors, and they were the ones who were accustomed to caring for people. So some African American men became quite wealthy, like Alonzo Herndon, who was in Atlanta and who had a 25-seat barbershop. This advertisement says the largest barbershop in America. So if he says that, I'm sure that must be true. But Alonzo Herndon, like some other African American men who were barbers and who became quite wealthy, Alonzo Herndon founded Atlanta Life Insurance Company. And that happened in a couple of other instances. Well, Sarah Breedlove, Madam Walker's brothers, were not on the level of Alonzo Herndon, but they did have a little bit more status than the average laborer. But that gave her some exposure to hair care. So she continues to, she's living in St. Louis, she's working as a washerwoman, struggling. She marries a second time. It's not a good marriage. It's kind of a messy situation. And her hair begins to fall out. Now, it's falling out because of hygiene of the time. So I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands on this, but a lot of people believe that Madam Walker invented the hot comb. So I know that some of you heard that growing up. Don't raise your hand if you think it, because it's not true. I just want to let you know. But what Madam Walker was doing was trying to address the hygiene of the time. This was a time when 90% of African Americans lived in the southern United States, most in rural areas working on farms. Most homes in America did not have indoor plumbing at that time. They didn't have electricity. So hygiene, needless to say, was quite different. And I won't go into the details, but just imagine if you couldn't just jump in the shower every morning and you didn't wash your hair maybe once a month, maybe not at all during the winter, what kind of, not just dandruff, but really bad scalp infections. And as a result of that, people were going bald. And so Sarah Breedlove was like a lot of other women. She was losing her hair. And she said, because she was great at marketing and branding and telling her origin story, her origin story was, I was so ashamed of my frightful appearance that I prayed to the Lord for a solution. And one night in a dream, a big African man appeared and told me what to mix up for my formula. Some of the ingredients came from Africa. I sent for them, I mixed them together. I applied them to my scalp, and my hair began to grow back faster than it had ever fallen out. So I believe that's part of the truth. You know, even Einstein said that the theory of relativity came to him in a dream. So I'm not going to doubt that she had a dream. But there were also some other factors. Her brothers had been barbers. She had observed them. She worked for a while for Annie Malone, who had the Poro Company, and she sold Annie Malone's products, and they became major rivals. And then when she moved from St. Louis to Denver in 1905, she went to work as a cook for a pharmacist named E.L. Schultz, who had the largest pharmacy west of the Mississippi River. And Schultz was really familiar with this formula. It wasn't a new formula. Annie Malone didn't invent it. Cutacure was already around. It was very similar, but it was basically an ointment like Vaseline with sulfur in it. And the real key was wash your hair more often, apply this ointment to your scalp with sulfur. It heals the sores. Your hair grows back. Hence, Madam Walker's wonderful hair grower. So you can see that it worked, because here we see her in the center, her hair is falling. It sort of looks like she has a short natural, but in reality, she's going bald. And then you can see that she now has hair that's full and healthy. And this is her wonderful hair grower and her vegetable shampoo, the two key ingredients. And she was very smart about advertising. Here she is. She's just moved to Indianapolis. Now she's moving on up at this point, driving her Model T. In Denver, she married her third husband, Charles Joseph Walker, began to call herself Madam C.J. Walker, just a bit of an affectation. You know, Paris was the capital of fashion and cosmetics even then, and so she just added a little extra touch. She wanted to make sure nobody would call her by her first name, so she's Madam C.J. Walker. And then they moved briefly to Denver. They travel around selling products, and she opens her first beauty school in Denver in 1908, and then they moved to Indianapolis, which is where I grew up. And why Indianapolis? Well, Indianapolis had a thriving black business community, 3 black newspapers, including one that was nationally distributed. It was kind of like a black USA Today with current events and sports and entertainment. It was near the center of population of the country, had hundreds of trains going through every day. So for somebody who had a mail order business, this was a really great place to operate. So she saw all of the business advantages. And so she advertised in one of the newspapers, the Indianapolis Freeman, and she used that before and after picture. She was, one of the first people to do that kind of thing, and she knew that it was pretty effective, just like Jenny Craig commercials. You could see that it really worked. And she had testimonials, and women would write to her, and it was always about not just the hair care products, but it was about economic independence. And one woman wrote to her, and she said, before I started using Madam Walker's wonderful hair grower, my hair was 1/8 of an inch long, and now my hair is down my back, and I have been able to throw my wig away. And then another woman wrote to her, and she said, you have made it possible for a black woman to make more money in a day as one of your sales agents than she could in a month working in somebody's kitchen. So I think over time, this hair care product, yes, women needed the products, but as she taught people, as she traveled around the United States, the Caribbean, and Central America, she realized that the women, yes, they wanted to look good, but they needed education and they needed economic independence. So these things all came wrapped into one. But here she is soon after she arrived in Indianapolis. And soon around that same time that picture was taken, there was a big campaign to build a new black YMCA in the city. And Madam Walker had been a member of the AME Church in Indianapolis, in St. Louis, and in Pittsburgh, and of course joined the church in Indianapolis. And the man who's on the left in the light-colored coat, George Knox, was the publisher of the Indianapolis Freeman. He was also chairman of the board of the Black YMCA. And a big campaign to build this new YMCA was starting just as she arrived. And Jesse Moreland, those of you, if anybody went to Howard, you know Moreland Spingarn Library. Jesse Moreland was one of the first black secretaries of the YMCA, and he had persuaded Julius Rosenwald, the head of Sears Company, to pledge $25,000 to any city in America where the black and white communities would work together to raise the balance of $75,000 to build a $100,000 building. So $100,000 might rent this tent today, but it would build a really nice building then. And so there was a big rally. Jesse Moreland traveled around the country raising money, and he came to Indianapolis, and he had this rally, and the leadership of the black YMCA came, the leadership of the white YMCA came, and people were pledging money, and some of the very wealthy white businessmen were pledging $10,000, $5,000, $1,000. And Madam Walker stood up, and to everyone's astonishment, said, I pledge $1,000 to the building fund of the YMCA, because I believe if I help our boys, it will help our girls, and that is what I am interested in. She knew that the boys needed help, but she knew almost nothing was being done for the girls. But that stunned people. No black woman had ever given that amount of money for that kind of cause in Indianapolis. And so now people began to write about her, not just because of her hair care products, but because of her philanthropy, because of her generosity. And so she, as she traveled, her crowds got bigger because people had been reading about her in the black newspapers. And so she would tell the story. She was really smart about this origin story. I was in a slave cabin, and then I began to make this much money, and now I have a fur coat and I have a car, and you can too. I mean, it was selling hope in a jar. And so as she began to travel, she was beginning to see herself in a very different light. And she went to Booker T. Washington's 1912 National Negro Business League Convention. And she arrived in her chauffeur-driven car. She couldn't be missed. She had met Booker T. Washington before. She had even visited his campus in Tuskegee. But she was not part of his inner circle. But she still thought she should be part of his inner circle. And when she arrived, she sent word to him and asked to be included on the program. So for any of you who have done conferences, you know that you've set that speaking list months in advance. But she was like, you still should consider me. But on that first day of the convention, he ignored her request. On the second day of the convention, her good friend George Knox, publisher of the Indianapolis Freeman and a good friend of Booker T. Washington's, stood up during an appropriate break and said, we should hear from Madam C.J. Walker. She is the woman who contributed $1,000 to the building fund of the YMCA in my hometown. She has an incredible story to tell. And Booker T. Washington sort of looked right past him and said, we're discussing lifetime membership. And then he proceeded to call upon one of Madam Walker's neighbors from Indianapolis, a man named H.L. Saunders, who was, in fact, a very successful businessman. He owned a uniform company, making company. He had been a bellman at a fancy hotel in Indianapolis. His wife was a seamstress. They combined their talents, and they made uniforms for people who worked in hotels and who worked in service. But Madam Walker now had a business that was not just in Indiana. His business was just in Indiana. Her business was in all over the United States, the Caribbean, and Central America. Mr. Saunders had been the treasurer of the fundraising campaign for the YMCA, and he had contributed the very generous sum of $250. But of course, Madam Walker had contributed 4 times as much. Now, she was a good church-going woman. I know she knew that you were not supposed to look into the collection plate as it went by and compare your gifts to others. However, howsoever, right? I know that she had at least a twinge of resentment, but she waited until the final day of the convention, and as the last banker was completing what I'm sure were scintillating remarks, she stood at her seat, looked toward Booker T. Washington at the podium and said, surely you are not going to shut the door in my face. I am a woman who came from the cotton fields of the South. From there, I was promoted to the wash tub. From there, I was promoted to the kitchen. And from there, I promoted myself. I promoted myself into the business of manufacturing hair goods and preparations. And I have built my own factory on my own ground. The next year, he invited her back as a keynote speaker. And here they are, thank you. Here they are at the dedication of the YMCA after it's been built in 1913. And when he arrived at the train station in Indianapolis, Madam Walker sent her chauffeur to pick him up, and he was a guest in her home. And by the time he died in 1915, there was a mutual respect between the two. I'm just going to speed through these because I want to take a few questions, and I know Brenda's on a schedule, and we want to hear some reggae. Okay. But Madam Walker traveled all over the United States training sales agents, and she was really a brilliant marketer. I think one of the reasons she's more remembered than some of her competitors is that she would be on Instagram, I know, and TikTok. She'd be all over this. She knew how to surround herself with really talented people. When she would travel, she would make a speech. She even had a PowerPoint presentation that was called a stereopticon. It was glass slides that projected onto a screen or onto a wall. And so she would have pictures not just of her products, but of black schools and institutions and individuals so that she could inspire people. And when there was no movie house in a town or, certainly no TV or radio, that was a big deal for somebody like that coming to town and showing pictures. But then she would take a smaller group, maybe 8 to 12 women in a smaller room who wanted to be Walker sales agents, and she would demonstrate her products and teach them, and she would pay attention. Who was the woman who asked the best questions? You know, who did the other women gravitate towards? Who seemed to have leadership abilities? And she would make that person her lead agent. And then she also surrounded herself with really, her C-suite was a great attorney, F.B. Ransom. The manager of her factory was a woman who had been dean of girls at a black school. So she knew she had her own deficits in education. She was a self-educated person, but she knew to surround herself with people who would make her business, would cross the T's and dot the I's. But these are some of the agents in Ohio. She advertised extensively in the black press. Some of the black publishers said that she helped keep them in business because she paid her bills on time. And I would say that her attorney, Mr. Ransom, made sure the bills were paid on time because she was traveling. And then here she is at her 1917 convention, her first national convention of Walker beauty culturists, as she called them, and sales agents. And she had trained by this time thousands of African American women. And I know this had to have been one of the first national conventions of American businesswomen. And at this convention, she gave prizes not just to the women who sold the most products, but to the women who contributed the most to charity. Mary Kay was born a couple of years later, and she gave prizes to the women, of course, as you know, who sold the most products. But Madam Walker was creating a social responsibility model. And she said to her agents, I want you to understand that as Walker agents, your first duty is to humanity. I want others to look at us and realize that we care not just about ourselves, but about others. And she was also encouraging them to be politically active. At the end of the convention, the women sent a telegram to President Woodrow Wilson urging him to support legislation to make lynching a federal crime. This is 1917, so we know that that bill just got signed more than 100 years later. But there had just been the East St. Louis massacre when at least 36 African Americans were killed, were attacked in East St. Louis. And it was a George Floyd kind of moment. There was reaction all over the country. There was a huge march in New York up Fifth Avenue called the Silent Protest Parade. And Madam Walker, by this time, had moved to New York and was on the executive committee of the NAACP that helped to organize this Silent Protest Parade. And a day after the parade, Madam Walker and a group of Harlem leaders traveled to Washington to present a petition to President Woodrow Wilson. They thought they had an appointment with him. Somehow, once they arrived, he was unavailable. And then they went up to Capitol Hill to speak with other members of Congress. But I know this is impossible to read, but this is the actual petition. And then it was her daughter, Alelia, who's here in the chauffeur-driven car, who persuaded her to move to New York. She had been in Indianapolis since 1910, traveling, and her health was really beginning to fail. She had high blood pressure, and all of the things that we do easily now, some of those medical remedies were not available at the time. But her daughter persuaded her that they needed to be in Harlem. They needed to have a presence. So the company headquarters remained in Indianapolis, but her daughter persuaded her that they needed to buy this townhouse on 136th Street. And they hired Vertner Tandy, the first licensed black architect in New York. And for people who are alphas, I don't know if there are any alphas in the group, but anyway, one of the jewels, the founding members of Alpha Phi Alpha. And they bought one townhouse and then two, and then had Vertner Tandy combine the two. And this is the various that building is no longer there. If you know New York City, it's where the Count Cullen branch of the New York Public Library is, right behind the Schomburg. In Indianapolis in 1927, the Walker Company built a 4-story building with a theater, a factory, corporate offices, a ballroom. And they're actually celebrating their 95th anniversary this weekend. And then Madam, as Ms. Farrington said, Madam by Madam C.J. Walker is our new line of hair care products exclusively at Walmart. And then this is Villa Lawaro, the home that Madam Walker built in 1918. So that beautiful townhouse, that was her daughter's townhouse. I just joked, but I think it's pretty serious that the house was too small for 2 women. And so she needed her own large house. And then this is the more recent iteration of the house. So the Richelieu Dennis, who was the founding CEO of Sundial Brands, purchased the house a couple of years ago. So Rich really bought the Madam Walker trademark a few years ago. So that's how I got to know him. And then he sold Sundial to Unilever. But we still have a Madam Walker line, but he's very involved in venture capital for African American women entrepreneurs. And this is the Pierre Moss fashion show from last summer. And just another shot from the front of the house. So I love taking questions. Brenda, we have time for a couple of questions? All right. Thank you. Ooh. Yes, please stand up. Tell us who you are. Oh, Karen, hey! How are you?
Is Villa Laurel going to be open for tours or anything like that? I've seen it many times from the outside. I'm so dying to see it from.
So I'll repeat the question since I'm not Oprah. And so Karen Chambers, thank you so much for coming. So she was asking if Villa Laurel is going to be open to the public. So it is. The village of Irvington is really not feeling that having this become a really major public space. But there will be, from time to time, there'll be certain days of the year. But there's some major restoration going on. The previous owners actually did a fabulous job of, stabilizing the house and doing some updates. But it's a 100-plus-year-old house, and so there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. So there's a restoration architect who's doing it. And, of course, COVID slowed things down. But I hope within the next year or so, it will, things will happen. But Richelieu Dennis and the Dennis family started something called New Voices Fund that I know you know about. And so the idea is for Villa Laurel to be a convening place when some of the fellows go through the entrepreneurship program. And I might have a few things there if they let me. Yes.
I visited there when it was open. I think it must have been about 12, 13 years.
1998?
Yeah. And I was absolutely amazed how forward-thinking she is. Because I went down in the basement.
Do you want to stand up? I don't know that everybody can hear you, but is it with, or just,
Yeah.
okay. I'll repeat it. I'm sorry. Go on.
I went down in the basement, and she had a dryer there. And the dryer was, it was amazing. It was fire. And then you put your clothes in, and the drum broke, and it was just a regular dryer.
Right.
It was an amazing house. I think they had various interior designers to, try to duplicate the house. It's original. I don't know.
So she was saying that, and thank you for that reminder. So in 1998, the people who owned the house before the Dennis family, Harold and Helena Doley. Harold is an African American investment banker, and they invited the United Negro College Fund to do a designer show house and turned the rooms over to different designers. So she was mentioning how forward-thinking Madam Walker was. She built there was an organ that piped through the entire house, and then in the laundry room there was a version of a dry cleaning plant in a way, where there were racks, metal racks, and you would hang the clothes on the racks, and sort of like in libraries where you have those stacks that pull out, and underneath was a fire that would dry the clothes. Right?
We're going to switch mics.
Ah, great.
Anybody else? Okay.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Aisha Christian. I'm one of the
Hello,
board
Ms.
members
Christian.
here. Thank you so much for joining us. Question is, how did you find your journey, your decision to make a point of archiving and making sure that we all know your family's history? If you could just tell us a little bit about that decision with your personal story.
Sure. No, absolutely. So, my friends Henry and Neil are here, and we were in school together, in college. Oh, we just have to get a little farther away. Anyway, we were telling stories to each other, things that we never knew about each other, even though we've known each other for 50 years. But it's how we started doing what we do. So when I was growing up, my mother was vice president of the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company, and my dad was president of another black hair care company, and that's a more complicated story. But anyway, technically competitors, but not really, because by that point in the 1960s, the Walker Company, which had been a premier company, had not really kept up with the times and, in a sense, had been disrupted the way that they were doing things. But I would go with my mother to her office and play on her typewriter and her adding machine before calculators and computers, and visit the ladies in the factory who were still mixing the Walker products by hand, and slide across the ballroom floor. So I knew that my mother worked in this amazing building. But the last thing I wanted to do was do what my parents did, which is like most kids. I really loved writing. And my parents encouraged me to follow that path, and I became a journalist. And when I went to journalism school at Columbia in 1975, my advisor, Phyllis Garland, was the only black woman on the faculty. And we were talking about my master's paper topics, and I was giving lame suggestions, as most students do. And at the end of the conversation, she said, your name is Alelia. Do you have any connection to Madam Walker and Alelia Walker? And I said, yeah, that's my family. She said, that's what you're going to write about. And so it was really Phil who put me on that path. Now, I'm really fortunate that I am from a family that saves everything. And my grandfather and grandmother had Alelia Walker's books from the Dark Tower, her cultural salon, some furniture, none of the real jewelry, but silverware, china, lots of things, and then tons of letters. Madam Walker's secretary, who had started working for her in 1914, was still working for her in the 1960s and 70s, was still working for the company. And Mrs. Reynolds had saved in file cabinets all of the correspondence between Madam Walker and her attorney, and between her daughter and the attorney, all the sales receipts. So we have literally more than 40,000 documents that have been digitized at Indiana Historical Society. So that was kind of the foundation. And then because she had known Booker T. Washington and Ida B. Wells and Mary McLeod Bethune and W.B. Du Bois, I was able to use those manuscript collections. So I am information rich, and that's really kind of unusual for a woman-owned company or a black-owned company. But I'm just passionate about telling the story from something I had no interest in at a young age. It's now what I do every day, and I'm almost finished with the first major biography of her daughter and her life in Harlem during the 1920s. Thanks for asking. Anybody else? All right, so Brenda, nobody's asked me about the Netflix series, so I have. Yeah, okay, well, I'm glad you were entertained, and I'm glad you thought it was fabulous. I thought Octavia Spencer was fabulous. As for the rest of it, it's complicated. So I would just say, please read the book. There was a lot that I just thought, there's so much of our history that hasn't been told. And when it first appears, when it's first done by Hollywood, it can be kind of fact-based, and it can be really, really fiction-based. And I just think the writers and the showrunners kind of had a lot more literary license than I was in favor of. But things like, I love the scene where Madam Walker is trying to convince women to buy her products. She's in the market. And again, Octavia Spencer was great. I mean, she's just commanded the screen every time she was there. But it was problematic for me. I'm choosing my words. I want to be specific. That Booker T. Washington, for instance, was portrayed in the way that he was. Now, he's a complicated person, just like Madam Walker is. But in the film, as you heard me tell the story about sort of the arc of their relationship, that it started in a confrontational way and then, came to the point where there's some detente. But in the film, he was just such a sexist and misogynist. I mean, he was, that generation, but he wouldn't have said I don't want black women to succeed because it makes black men look bad. I mean, that's essentially what that speech was about. But his wife was a very powerful woman, so that just kind of, and you know, and I know some of his descendants, so they weren't happy, but I'm like, neither was I. A'Lelia Walker was portrayed as kind of a goofball. And as a person who, she didn't have a girlfriend named Esther, but that they wanted to develop that theme. That was not true. And the other thing, they have her not being able to sing, like she's trying to have a music career. But I will say, when I interviewed Alberta Hunter, the famous blues singer who had been to her parties and who knew her, one of the things she pointed out to me is that she said, you know, A'Lelia Walker really had a good singing voice. I tried to tell them they were not interested in that. But overall, it means that more people know who Madam Walker is. And I'm hoping that my new book will be somebody's series, because I think it's an interesting story and I might get another chance to tell a version of it. Anybody else? Okay, last one.
I'm just going to say I appreciate hearing your perspective, because I saw the gloss and I was delighted to see it and have it available to view, but I knew that there had to be some variations on the story, so I'd much rather hear it from you.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just thinking also, so F.B. Ransom, Madam Walker's attorney, he was such a straight arrow. And I think, and just the sort of devolving into stereotypes, like let's have this sort of jackleg lawyer, makes black lawyers look bad, and have him have a cousin who's not just a numbers runner but a pimp. I mean, and then have him bet on the numbers and then invest in the company. So that whole scenario was just like, really? Why did we go there when he was the person who would have kept her away from people like that? But thank you. I do hope you read the book, and if you are on Twitter, the article that's pinned to the top of my Twitter feed is a piece that I wrote for a website that was called The Undefeated, that's now called Anscape, where I talk about the interesting behind-the-scenes journey. Okay, Brenda?
Absolutely, give her a hand, give her a hand, give her a hand. And the best thing about this is she has books here on the side, and there will be a book signing right now. So if you're interested, we'll have a book sign, and when you're doing that, we're going to have Halo. It's going to be our next performance. You cannot miss this. You cannot. So if you guys are ready, Shayna? You sure can.
Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. We are delighted to be here and very excited that you are here to join us to experience Halo Incorporated for our extended community Halo at Large, that you see over here in our t-shirts, what we have to present to you today in honor of Juneteenth. And for those of you not yet familiar with us, Halo Incorporated was established in 2017 by Halo Quartet, the first African American barbershop ensemble, to compete on the international stage of any barbershop organization. And you see that there are just 3 of us main core Halo Quartet members here today. One of our members is sick, but you know, we're here trioing it up, and we're just blessed and happy to be here. And when we achieved this milestone in 2015, we had the sense that this moment was bigger than us and more monumental than simply being the first black fill in the blank, whatever, but rather it was a calling to use this platform and this art form as a way to build a new kind of community with an expanded purpose. And looking at the history of barbershop singing and how long it took for the community to see this kind of representation for what was already an African American art form, we saw what looked like America in miniature. A community built on the work and creativity of black folks that saw fit to establish laws to exclude them. And long after those laws were abolished, residues of racism continued to serve as barriers to express desires for diversity and inclusion. And if you've ever witnessed a barbershop convention, or gathering, you'll certainly have noticed the profound sense of community people experience from the act of singing together in a cappella 4-part harmony. And so we thought about this community, and then we thought about the music and how the tension in the harmonies of barbershop is the most satisfying experience to co-create. And then we thought, what if we could use the music as a framework for the tension we experience in dialogue about racism? And what if we could learn to align our points of view with the functions of each voice part so that we can contribute our perspectives to the shared truth of racism in the United States and find ways to move forward as a new kind of community? This is Halo's mission with Race and Real Talk.
Barbershop was named for the style of a cappella singing developed by Black Americans starting around the Reconstruction era. It was named barbershop because white patrons would witness it when they came to businesses like this historic building. The first Black-owned barbershop in Southampton, and would see and hear the barbers improvising music. This improvised vocal harmonization was born out of the tradition of spirituals and work songs from the hundreds of years of slavery. Their primary means of music making. Since African instruments were taken away and banned to try to strip enslaved people of their identities. So this creativity of melody, rhythm, and harmony was expressed as both a musical art form as well as a social art. White people would imitate this singing in minstrel shows and eventually began to take it more seriously, eventually establishing the Barbershop Harmony Society, first known as SPEBSQSA, an acronym so long it's hard to remember what it stood for. At the time, the society was only open to white men of good moral character, as was the policy for the organization Sweet Adelines International. In 1941, the Grand Central Redcaps won SPEBSQSA's contest in New York, but were denied participation in the national contest, because they were African Americans. Thank you. Since then, there were no Black quartets to compete or perform in these organizations until Halo competed with Harmony Incorporated in 2015. So, yeah.
So the way Halo brings these key components of music, community, and America's struggle with racism together is through our unique metaphor of the functions of the voice parts in barbershop singing. The lead sings the melody, between an upper voice harmony and two lower voiced harmonies. This is the center of the story and the window into the various lived experiences of those who are targets of racism in this country. The bass line is the foundation of the harmonies and the foundation of the conversation. Why is it necessary to have it? And understand the lived experiences of targets of racism. The baritone harmonizes between the lead and the bass, bringing some internal substance to the chord. And in conversation, this presents as fine details, nuances, statistics even, as well as the parallel experiences of those who are not targets of racism, but also move through the same spaces as those who do. This could be the white person who lived on the other side of the tracks, or white folks who have experienced a different kind of discrimination that helps them connect to the lived experience of racism. To maintain the balance of the chord and the conversation, though, this perspective does not typically come into the foreground of the dialogue. The tenor harmonizes above the lead, lightly, also to keep the lead and bass voices in the foreground of the sound unit. It gives barbershop its effervescent quality. And in conversation, it's the higher truth we're working together to actualize. The progress we've made, solutions we can implement, hope for a better tomorrow. And when these parts are in perfect alignment, it feels like there are more voices actually present. There are overtones, undertones, and 4 voices sound like 8. 15 voices sound like 50. There's a lock and ring that goes through your ears into your entire body. into your mind. When our truths are in alignment with the facts and our heads and our hearts are in the same place, this is what we call the halo effect. So as we share this presentation with you today, great music by great groups discussing Black history, Indigenous history, gentrification, and considerations of critical race theory here in Southampton, we invite you to listen with your hearts and listen to your minds. What do you know? What's new? Where does your experience fit into these stories? We will get to share reactions, thoughts, and ideas at the conclusion. So let's open all of our souls for the music and the history that's here for us in the Southhampton African American Museum. Days can be sunny with never a sigh. Don't need what money can buy. Birds in the trees sing their day full of song. Why shouldn't I sing along? Lately I'm so chipper all the day, happy with my lot. How did I get that way? Look, take a look, just one look at what I've got. I am so happy with my lot. Just look at what I've got. See what I've got. What I've got. Hey, cause I've got rhythm, I've got music, I've got my man who can ask for anything more. Well, I've got daisies in green pastures, I got my man who can ask for anything more. Old man trouble, I don't mind him, and you won't find him hanging around my door. I got starlight, I got sweet dreams, I got my man who can ask for anything more. I got rhythm, I got music, I got my man who can ask for anything more. I got daisies growing in green pastures. I got my man who can ask for anything more. You can talk about old man trouble, you know I don't mind him. You ain't never gonna find the old man hanging around outside of my door. I got starlight, I got sweet dreams. I'm so high cause I got my guy who can ask for more. Now you can talk all you want. Talk about old man trouble, give it a break. Say your breath, don't you know I don't mind him. You ain't never gonna find him. Never gonna find the old man hanging around my door. Hey, I've got cool rhythm, I've got sweet, sweet music, starlight, sweet dreams. Who can ask for more? Who can ask for anything? No more trouble hanging around my door. Who can ever ask for anything more? Who can ask for?
God, come on up.
Come on up.
Now this one we can't do without a fourth one, so
Yeah.
we welcome to the stage Alan Lloyd, another honorary Halo member of Halo at Large and leader of Key of E, and she's also a very talented arranger and composer who arranged this next song that I think you're very familiar with, and if you don't know, you're gonna learn today. Ain't no way. Let's read. Hello. Let's switch that. Give me you go over
hold my hands, hold my hands. Ain't no way, there just ain't no way, ain't no way, ain't no way, ain't no way for me to love you if you won't let me. Why don't you stop trying to be something you're not now? For hard, cold, and cruel is a man who's paid too much for what he's got. And if you see me like you say you do, oh, baby, 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 so don't you know, baby, just ain't no way, no for me to love you.